Hare Krishna. I think now it will be possible. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. I'm taking from, I could have done from ProFX, actually I can do. Okay, thank you. So we are reading from chapter 9, Bhagavad Gita as it is, the most confidential knowledge, and text number 4. So this chapter 9 is considered to be the most confidential knowledge. It is because in this chapter, Lord is describing about the unalloyed devotional service unto Him. So as we saw earlier, chapters 2 and 3 describe the nature of the soul, and therefore it is said to be confidential knowledge. And chapters 7 and 8, they talk about the glories of the Lord briefly, and also talks about the different kinds of energies of the Lord, the material, spiritual energy, and the 4 kinds of people who surrender unto Him, and 4 kinds of people who don't surrender unto Him. So there are more confidential knowledge that is revealed in chapters 7 and 8, and therefore that section is called more confidential knowledge. But this chapter, 9th chapter, is said to be the most confidential knowledge. And the first 3 verses of this chapter constitute the first section, which can be categorized as the king of all knowledge. So the Lord is giving a brief description about the king of all knowledge. So Lord is describing who can access this knowledge and what is the characteristic of this knowledge. So as we saw earlier, this knowledge is obtained by one who is not envious of the Supreme Lord, Anasuya way. And this knowledge is not just some sort of a theoretical knowledge, but it is also Vijnana Sahitam. It is also practical knowledge. And then once one knows this knowledge, one is freed from all miseries of material existence. And then we also saw how this knowledge is the king of all education. It is the most pure, it is the most confidential, it is can be perceived directly. This knowledge is not something that one has to depend on someone else to realize that this knowledge is true. No. Everyone can perceive the pratyaksha avagamam, dharmyam. So by executing these principles of devotional life, one can see one's own self and the Supreme Lord directly, by direct perception. And this is also very joyfully performed, susukham kartum avyayam. So this confidential knowledge is very, very special, but this is not available to everyone. Why is that? One may wonder. If this is so wonderful knowledge, why is not everyone getting to this knowledge? The qualification that is required for acquiring this knowledge is Shraddha or faith. And the disqualification for not acquiring this knowledge is Ashraddhadhanaha Purusha. So one who is faithless in this, who is not having faith in the process of devotional service. Ashraddhadhana Purusha, Dharmasyasya Parantapa. So if one is not very faithful in this process of devotional service, then for them, Aprapyamam Nivartante, they will not obtain me, and they come back to what? Nitya Samsara Vartamani. So they will not be able to come to the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, and rather they have to come back to this material world again and again. So now it is very interesting that, faith is one of the most important element that we need to have in this devotional service. Then how do we obtain faith? In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explained how association with devotees, scriptures, and serving under the spiritual master, all this increase our faith. Now, it may be also possible that someone may see and say, where do I see God in this world? I see only material things in this world, and how should I develop faith in that the God exists at all? Forget about doing service to the Lord, but how will I even know that the God exists in this world? I mean, God exists at all. I cannot even see Him anywhere. So how do I develop faith? So this may be a very relevant question one may acquire, that okay, all people do not see God, therefore we conclude that God does not exist. So is that the way? People may think, some people, the atheistic class of people, they think, I cannot see anything, so-called all-pervading, all-knowledgeable God, therefore I will take to atheistic viewpoint. But Lord is very merciful. He is also explaining how we can see Him. What is His relationship in this material world? How is He present in this material world? What is the relationship of the material world to Him? So He helps us to understand His relationship to this material world in this next section of the chapter, that is verse 4 to 10. So in this we will see how Krishna is present everywhere. This and the next verse, they are very interesting verses, for they contradict in some ways one another, but there is a deeper meaning which Srila Prabhupada explains is how we should see these verses. So this verse, Maya tatam idam sarvam jagat avyakta murtina. So Prabhupada in his lecture to this verse emphasizes on the word avyakta murtina. It is, these two words are very significant, and in fact each of these words individually are also very significant. So the Lord is saying how He is pervading in this world, in this universe. So He says, in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. So what is this unmanifested form? Let us try to pay some attention to this word. So there is these two words, Vyakta and Avyakta. So Vyakta means manifested, Avyakta means unmanifested. So these words are used in different places. So even in the last chapter of Bhagavad Gita we saw Parastasmat tu bhavanyo Vyakto Vyaktat Sanatanaha. So there is this material world which is manifesting and unmanifesting. So we saw the time scale of Brahma, where at each day the living entities are coming into being, the material universes are being manifested, and then the living entities are coming. And then at the night there is a partial dissolution and the living entities are getting unmanifested again. So in this way we can see there is a manifestation and unmanifestation of the material world and the living entities in this material world. Similarly, we will see there is description in the 12th chapter about the worship of the impersonal form of the Lord and the personal form of the Lord. Even there we will say this word avyakta, avyaktam, quite often referring to the unmanifested or the impersonal Brahman form. So these words are very important to understand, because these words are also helpful for us to understand the distinction between the personal philosophy and the impersonal philosophy. And therefore Prabhupada stresses on these words very significantly in his lecture. So this word Prabhupada avyakta, which refers to unmanifested, means which is not visible to our eyes or which is not directly perceivable. So something which is manifested is that which is directly perceivable, and something which is unmanifested which is not directly visible to our eyes. For example, in this right now we are in Boston, and when we see outside, we don't see the sun. Although the sun is existing in the sky, at this point of time we are unable to see the sun. Therefore, although the sun is existing, he is said to be unmanifested. Unmanifested means, to my perception, to my eyes, I am not able to see something which is existing. Although it is existing, I am not able to see it. So, similarly, unmanifested does not mean it does not exist. It only means that I am not able to see it. And similarly, there is another word which is used similar to Vyakta and Avyakta is Prakata and Aprakata. So, the Leelas of the Lord, the pastimes of the Lord, the appearance of the Lord is said to be Prakata and Aprakata. That means the Lord is manifesting Himself sometimes, like 5,000 years ago, Lord appears in this material world, in this earthly planet, and one can physically see the Lord. So He is directly manifesting. So sometimes he is not physically manifest. That means he is not visible to direct senses, but he is also present. He is also doing his pastimes. So his activities are always going on, but sometimes I can directly perceive and sometimes I cannot directly perceive. So this is going on. So if this is going on, that means we should also recognize that the unmanifested form refers to not the non-existence of the Lord, but my inability to see Him. Therefore, Lord is helping us to see how we should see His presence, how He is present everywhere, in what form is He present. By understanding that, we will understand Him better, we will develop further faith in Him. That ashraddha danaha purusha, that the lack of faithlessness will reduce. And therefore, Lord very mercifully is explaining how we should see Him in this material world. So, another important word apart from this Vyakta and Avyakta is Murtina. Prabhupada emphasizes that there is a form to everything, even to what is not which is not manifested to our eyes, unmanifested to our eyes, it also has got a form. Therefore, just because I am not able to see the Lord, that does not mean Lord is having no form. No. This word Murtina is very important. Murtina means form. Just like Rama adi murtishu kala niyamena tishtan. So, Rama adi murtishu. So, in the different forms, the Lord manifests. Just like He expands Himself into innumerable incarnations. Similarly, He has multiple forms. So, Prabhupada is emphasizing that we should recognize that although sometimes we may not perceive the Lord directly, yet He is still present and He has got a form. This is against the principle of the Mayavadis, who consider Lord is unmanifest, He is not visible to my eyes and He has no form. But this verse is directly refuting that. You cannot say that Lord has no form. Lord has a form. Sometimes He may be in an unmanifested form, yet He has got His own form. So now and here it is also said that He is present in His unmanifested form all throughout the universe. He is spread all over the universe. In fact, this entire universe is pervaded by Him. So one may think, if Lord is present everywhere, why am I not able to see Him? What is the reason? Just like if I see that something is present everywhere. If I see a police or something, then I will act immediately according to the way police is present. Just like I'll slow down my car. I'll not speed up my car. I'll try to be in the limits of the speed. So, if the Lord is present everywhere, then if I'm able to see that, then immediately I will become a devotee. But I'm not seeing the Lord. Why is that? So, what is the reason for one not to be able to see the Lord? That is very nicely described in the purport by Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada is saying that when we are trying to see things, when we are trying to see in this material world, what are we using? We are using our senses, the knowledge acquiring senses. So, in order to see anything in this material world, we need our material senses. But we must recognize that not everything is visible to the gross material senses. Even though there are so many waves that are present here, which we use to talk, we watch the television, talk over mobile phones, they are not visible to our naked eyes. We cannot even perceive by any other senses. So in this way, there are so many things which are not perceivable to our gross senses. Similarly, the Supreme Lord is also not perceivable through the gross senses. Rather, there is another way to perceive Him. And the way to perceive Him is by engaging in pure devotional service. So the criteria to know Him is to engage in pure devotional service. And not just engage in pure devotional service. Prabhupada is further qualifying that by saying, under proper guidance. So when one is engaged in loving devotional service, pure devotional service to the Lord, then He reveals Himself. It is not that we can capture Him without vision. It is not that we can capture Him by some feat, exercises, no. Only when He willingly reveals that we can know Him, we can see Him. Not only Him, but even to understand His name, form, pastimes, etc. is not understood by simply our gross senses. Unless we don't engage in devotional service, we will not be able to penetrate into the transcendental understanding of His name, fame, pastimes, form, etc. Therefore, this engagement in devotional service is the most essential element to improve our faith, to see the reciprocation of the Lord, by which we become faithful. By engaging in the faithful way and progressively doing devotional service under proper guidance. This is very important. No one can do pure devotional service without proper guidance. And it is very important to note that this proper guidance means taking shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. If one is even less intelligent, very dull, not scholar, not studied in big universities, does not matter. If he receives the blessings of a pure devotee, spiritual master, then he understands the Supreme Lord. By the blessings of the spiritual master, one can see the absolute truth, one can see the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. But if one is not taking shelter of a bona fide spiritual master and not engaging properly and not able to receive the blessings of a pure devotee, one may be materially so qualified, yet one will not be able to perceive the presence of the Lord. And what happens when one renders pure devotional service? When one renders pure devotional service, one develops one's dormant loving propensity towards the Supreme Lord. We all have this inert Krishna consciousness, the love for the Supreme Lord in our heart. But right now, it is in dormant state, it is not awakened. But this can be awakened by hearing about the Supreme Lord, by chanting His holy names. So when we engage, so this service of Shravanam and Kirtanam, so just like when we think of service of, yes, we think of doing cooking, cleaning, collecting funds, so many other things. Yes, they are also services. Along with that, there is also the service of Shravanam and Kirtanam. So when we hear the transcendental glories of the Lord, when we chant the transcendental glories of the Lord, then naturally our loving propensity towards the Supreme Lord is awakened. When that propensity is awakened inside our heart, then we will engage in devotional service with greater enthusiasm. And when we also will see the reciprocation of the Lord, which will further our devotional service to the stage of pure love, prema. When we develop the pure love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then Prabhupada says, Brahma Samhita says, Premanchana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santa Sadaiva Priteshu Vilokayanti. So Premanchana Churita. So when one has developed this, one's eyes are anointed with love for the Supreme Lord, then he will be able to see the Lord both within and without. That means he will see the presence of the Lord everywhere, not just in one place. All times, Santa Sadaiva, in all times one will see the Supreme Lord. Now, it is difficult for one to understand, how is that one is able to see the Lord and one is not? It is sometimes difficult, but it is to be important to understand that the Lord is purchased only by one ingredient. It's by only one thing, that is love. The more we advance in Krishna consciousness, the more we will develop love for Him, the attraction for Him. So unless that our eyes are not tinged with the love, eye of devotion, then it is very difficult for us to understand the Lord and His form. the true devotees, pure devotees of the Lord, they always see the two-handed form of the Lord in their hearts always. So that is possible, that state to receive, that state to achieve, bhakti yogena manasi. So when we engage our mind and absorb ourselves in the service of the Lord, in His holy name, in His pastimes, in His activities, in His form, then the Lord will manifest in our heart. So the unalloyed spiritual self, that is the real constitutional position of ours, which is to render pure devotional service, when that is awakened, then to that degree, to the degree of that purification that we see, to that degree we will perceive the presence of the Lord. So that this idea that the Lord has a specific form, as Shyama Sundara, as a Natabara, as a Trivangi who is bent in three places, this is not some imagination. This is actually true transcendental form of the Lord. And when one is in pure love, one will be able to see in pure devotion to the Lord. So, therefore, it is not that the Lord is not present, it is just that when one is purified, one can see the Lord in one's heart. There is another beautiful verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita which also talks about a similar verse, which talks about a similar thing of how a pure devotee perceives the world. So this comes in the conversation between Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Raya, where it is said, Stavara jhangama dekhe na dekhe tara murti, sarvatra hoya nija ishtha deva spurti. Stavara jhangama dekhe. So stavara and jangama. So movable and inert. So when Mahabhagavata or a pure devotee, an advanced devotee, when he sees everything which is moving and not moving, what does he see? Na dekhe tara murti. He does not see their forms. So when we see something which is visible, an automobile, a tree, a stone, we see the form of that thing. But what does a Mahabhagavata, a pure devotee, sees? He sees sarvatra hoya nija ishta deva spurti. So rather, he immediately sees the manifest form of the Supreme Lord. So when we see the world, we see a distinction between the creator and the created. So when we see the created world, but we don't see the creator. But a pure devotee of the Lord, because he has developed the ecstatic love for Krishna, he sees nothing else, but even when he sees the material manifestation, he immediately sees the Lord. Just as we know the example that is often given in this connection, just like a mother who is very much in love with the child, when she sees that the child has gone very far for a school vacation or a picnic, and immediately she sees the socks or some shoes or something which is related to the child being present in the bedroom, she immediately remembers, oh, where is my child? How is she? How is he? So although she is seeing the same shoes or same things related to the child, but she is not exactly seeing that, but rather she is seeing the person, the child, how is the child. So also we see in Bhagavad Gita where Lord says how we can see Him. So Prabhupada says simply, just like when we taste the water, Lord says, I am the taste of the water, rasoham apsu kaunteya, the light of the moon and the sun. So all this are the representations of the Lord. I am that. So Lord says this. And then as soon as we see them, if we remember the Lord, then we are Krishna conscious. Then we are seeing Krishna everywhere. So therefore Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says this verse is very nice. Thavara jangama dekhe na dekhe tara murti. Sarvatra haya nija ishtha deva spurti. So a pure devotee of the Lord, he sees moving, non-moving objects, And in all that he sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he sees that as a transformation of Krishna's energy, and he also sees the Lord being present. So Prabhupada also explains in this verse that how the Supreme Personality of Godhead, how if he is spread everywhere, how can we understand that everything is in him? So in this verse, Lord says, Matsthani sarva bhutani na chaham teshu avastitha. All beings are in me. So if we say everything is resting in him, how do we understand? How do we understand that everything is resting in him, all this material universes? So Prabhupada explains that very nicely in this verse by stating that the sun, the example of the sun, although the sun is present in one place, the sunshine is pervading everywhere. So Prabhupada states the example, just as the sunshine is spread all over the universe, the energy of the Lord is spread all over the creation, and everything is resting in that energy. So just like we can say everything is resting in sun's energy, for the sun, although he is far and far away, the energy of the sun is all pervading. Similarly, the Lord, although he is present in his own spiritual abode, the energies which are emanating from him are all pervading the universe. And as we know in 7th chapter, Lord explains there are two kinds of fundamental energies in this entire material existence. And one is the gross and subtle material energy, and other is the spiritual energy. So it is very important to note that the Lord has three kinds of energy: the internal energy, the marginal energy, and the external energy. So external energy means bhumi rapo analo vayur kham mano buddhir evacha ahankara ityam me bhinna prakritir ashtata. So bhumi, the earth, apo, water, anala, fire, vayu, air, kham, ether. So these are the five gross pancha mahabhuta. So these are the five gross material energies. Then the subtle ones are mano, buddhir, ahankara. Mind, intelligence, and false ego. They are the subtle energies, material energies, which are separated from the Lord. These are Lord's separated material energies. And then we also know how living entity, which is beyond this gross and subtle energies, is tatastha sakti, that is marginal. So the living entity can either be under the influence of the superior energy, the Lord's internal energy, or the living entity can be under the influence of the gross material energy. So it is the living entity's free will that determines whether the living entity is in which state. So the pure devotee of the Lord is always under the influence of the Lord's internal energy. Because one is the pure devotee is always Mahatmanam stumam partha Devim Prakritim Ashritaha. So Devim Prakriti Ashritaha. So they are always under the influence of Lord's internal potency. So when we are under the internal influence of the Lord's internal potency of the Lord, then our natural propensity to serve the Lord comes. Then we also see the presence of the Lord, Sarvatra Haya Nija Ishta Deva Spurti. Then we also see the existence of the Lord in every step. So this is very important. So when we say that the Lord is not present, what does it mean? It is not like the Lord, is like the sun. When we say is present everywhere, it is not that the sun as a globe is present everywhere. The sun is present through the sunshine, and through his energies. Similarly, the Lord is also pervading over all the universes through his energies. The two kinds of energies, the living entities, that is Tathastha Sakti, and the gross and subtle material energies. So, in this way, we can see that actually everything is resting on Him. As we saw, prakata and aprakata, the avyakta and vyakta manifestations, the manifested and unmanifested forms. So, when the gopis of Vrindavana, when they saw that the Akrura, Kamsa sent Akrura to bring Krishna and Balaram to Mathura, and when Krishna and Balaram went to Mathura, they said they will come back very soon, but the gopis saw that Krishna and Balaram were not returning back to Vrindavan. So, although they were seeing that physically the Lord is not manifest because of their deep absorption in the Lord, they were always absorbed in the thoughts of the Lord, His activities, His form, His pastimes. They were always absorbed in that. Therefore, although the Lord was not present in the form of prakata, He was present in the form of aprakata. It means He was present in a different way. So, this is the nature of the pure devotees, that they never miss the Lord. They are always with the Lord. They are always absorbed in the Lord. So, this is purified existence. The purified existence, our degree of remembering the Lord, our degree of serving the Lord, our degree of understanding ourselves to be the servant of the Lord is always existing. Or at least as we purify ourselves, this ability to perceive the presence of the Lord, to see everything is connected to the Lord, that we will see. Otherwise, in the current state, we cannot see how everything is related to the Lord. Because we cannot see how everything is related to the Lord, we become perplexed. Sometimes we engage ourselves too much into something, and sometimes we renounce some things whimsically. But only one who is a devotee of the Lord, he can see properly what is the relationship of this with the Lord. And therefore, how should I accept this? How should I reject this? So, there should not be falgu vairagya. So, anything which is related to the Lord, I give it up. No. If it is in relationship with the Lord, then it has to be utilized in it that way. Just like a pure devotee, Srila Prabhupada, has engaged a lot of money in the service of the Lord. He has used the material elements like brick, stone, water in constructing beautiful temples. He used aeroplanes and dictaphones to travel and preach Krishna consciousness. If one is not purified in knowledge, then one will not be able to see the presence of the Lord, connection to the Lord, the various things of this world. When one does not know that connection, the connection of the things in this material world with the Lord, then we will think, oh, this is all Maya, this is all ignorance, then I have no connection with this. No, that is also not appropriate way of thinking. Now, Prabhupada also goes on then to explain that if the Lord is pervading everywhere, and we can perceive the Lord in different forms in this material world, this is also in the Western theology, there is a problem called the theory of transcendence and theory of immanence. What it means is that there is a doubt in the mind of the people whether the Lord is only present in the spiritual world, or is the Lord only present in the material world, or the Lord is present both in the spiritual world and the material world. So, theory of transcendence thinks that the Lord is present only in the spiritual world. Theory of immanence says that yes, the Lord is also manifest in some form in this material world. But how is He manifest in this material world is very difficult to understand. Therefore, many people become atheists. They cannot see the connection between the Lord being present in the spiritual world and Lord being present in the material world. How is the connection? Where do I see the connection? And therefore, these set of verses, starting from verses 4 to 10, they really clarify how do we see the form of the Lord, how do we see the presence of the Lord in this material world. And if the Lord is present everywhere, then one may think that, if Lord is expanded Himself or His energies are diversified in this material existence, then maybe He lost His original form. Some of the philosophers and people think that because Lord has created all this, he no more exists, or his form has got transformed. And therefore, we should not think the original Lord as someone different from this material existence. You should think this material existence itself as Lord. So there are some people who think like that. But Srila Prabhupada is stating that no, we have to see it in a proper light. And Prabhupada is giving the example of a king. So Prabhupada says, for example, a king heads a government which is but the manifestation of the king's energy. So king heads a government which is but the manifestation of the king's energy. The different governmental departments are nothing but the energies of the king, and each department is resting on the king's power. But still, one cannot expect the king to be present in every department personally. That is a crude example. So Prabhupada is giving an example just like the king. He is manifest because without his orders, without his empowering the other people, nothing can move. All the departments are in one way or the other dependent on the king. Or in other sense, they are the expansions of the king's energies. Yet, although these are all nothing but the energies of the king and resting on the king's power, it is not to expect that the king is present personally in all these departments. So, it is through his energy, it's through his authority, it's through his power, the departments are functioning. Yet, he is personally present, aloof from all this. Similarly, the Lord is manifesting all these material universes by his energies, without which it does not exist. At the same time, he is also aloof from all of them. So therefore, this Achintya Bheda Abheda philosophy, that he is simultaneously one with the creation and not one with the creation. This is very important to understand. And what is the proper relationship in which to understand this manifested world and the Lord, and how it is to be dovetailed in our Krishna consciousness, that we can understand from the teachings of the pure devotee and from the philosophy of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So when we see the creation and creator in its proper perspectives and engage ourselves in devotional service, then we will be able to see the Supreme Lord face to face. Then our faith in the Supreme Lord will increase. Otherwise, we see everything disjoint. We do not see the presence of the Creator. Just like when we see there are so many conflicts which are going on in the world. Sometimes the wars are going on in the world. So sometimes when we see these worlds independent, these events independent of the Lord, we see things in a different perspective. But when we see them with respect to, in relationship to the Lord, then we see a different perspective. Just like Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, when Srila Prabhupada first met Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada was associating with the Gandhian movement. And he thought, how will the devotional principles be propagated when the country is under the rule of the British? But Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj explained that the devotional principles are eternal and they are not to be seen in light with these movements. They will come and go for a temporary period of time, but the real duty of the living entity is to render devotional service, and that must be taught, because that is the panacea for all problems in the world. Unless one is not engaged in devotional service, the material energy is the biggest problem in the living entity's struggle for existence. The struggle for existence will either come in the form of war, in this form or the other form, as long as one will take birth in this material world. The struggle for existence can be only removed by engaging in our pure devotional service. It is when we engage in pure devotional service that we will actually go back to the spiritual kingdom. So here is the training that Lord is giving us as how we should see that this creation takes place by His diffusion of energies. And therefore, He is present. So these different energies that we see are nothing but His personal representation. So this, when we understand, we will relate, we will become more Krishna conscious by seeing all these things around us. We see, oh, there is a creator behind this. This is the energy of the Lord. And as we develop further and further love and devotion towards the Lord, we will see the presence of the Lord everywhere. I'll stop here and see if there are any questions or comments.